Welcome to Penelope's Garden. I'm Allison from Quilt and Code, and this is a Block of the Week mini quilt series. This video and pattern will guide you through a 5-part series of 4 blocks and putting it together with applique. Every quilt tells a story, and this one belongs to Penelope. She's real. She is my 8-pound menace to the animal kingdom, and I wouldn't trade her for the world. This Penelope's Playground is an original pattern series designed to showcase the GE Designs Stripology rulers and to celebrate the playful spirit of the cat who inspired it all. This is Block D. It's a square in a square block pattern. I'm trying to help you build your stripology skills and your quilt one delightful block at a time. Whether you're new to stripology or a seasoned stripper looking for a fresh adventure, this series was made for you. If you've missed the first 3 blocks of this series, no worries, but make sure that you follow along and get signed up for our email so that you do not miss a single thing. I am an instant gratification quilter, and I really wanted to make a block with a square and a square that avoided 1/8 inch increments. So some of your blocks may not end up as perfect as you would like. I am just calling them floating squares. So this will not affect the beauty of your quilt one bit. Now, Penelope's waiting, so let's pounce in to this last block of our quilt. We're going to start by cutting our 1 3/4 inch squares out of our fabric 5. I had a leftover strip that was from our B block. And so I am going to start by showing you how I'm going to do this with my mini ruler. A little bit more easy to handle, and so it makes it really simple to cut these blocks to that 1 3/4. I would normally straighten out this edge, but I don't really need to because I have a nice clean edge here. So I am going to line up with this horizontal line here, and I have turned it to my quarters side. So I can line it up easily with the quarter dotted line over here on the edge, and then I can simply cut my 1 3/4. I'm going to lay this over to the side because I'm going to do this again. If I only had the quarters mini or I wanted to use the quarters mini, then I could simply line it up again and do it again. I'm going to use this side to cut 2 though out of the squared. Okay, then I'm just going to turn it 90 degrees, and I'm actually going to straighten out that edge because I got a little bit of... Now that I have a nice clean edge over here, I can line this up again with my horizontal line here, my dotted line here, and then I can cut on that 1 3/4. The same method goes for the Stripology squared. And so, like I said, I already have a nice clean edge here. And since I'm doing 1 3/4 with this ruler, I simply need to add to the 1 1/2 that extra quarter. And so the difference between the mini is simply that the math is there done for you. And so I can go over here and I can do the 1 3/4 right there. I'm going to do, if I were using this one, I would just do that again. You could simply go to the Master the Stripology ruler and you could do 2 at a time. And so I'm going to do the same thing. I've simply turned it 90 degrees, and now I'm going to go at the 1 1/2 because 1 1/2 plus that quarter is going to give me 1 3/4. That gives me my fabric 5 1 3/4 squares. Out of my fabric 1 fabric, I am going to cut 2-inch squares. Those you can absolutely use the squared or the squared mini to cut. And so I am going to need 8 of these. I can get 4 here and 4 here, so I'm going to go ahead and cut 2 out of this little scrap of fabric. So I cut on the 2 and I cut on the 4, and then I'm going to simply slide that up, line up with a horizontal line, and that way I can bring my ruler right here, and as long as all my horizontal lines are lining up, I'm not going to have any problems. I did go ahead and make it so that I could cut on my 0 here, and then I'm going to do 2 and 4. And that gets me my squares for this gorgeous green fabric. But we actually need these squares cut diagonal. So I am actually going to do 4 at a time. I'm going to line up right here on the last slit because I have a diagonal that's coming down and I have a diagonal that's going up, which allows me to fit that right into that corner, meaning that I can use this last slit to give me a perfect cut for my triangles. Right there and right there, allowing me to use that last cut so that I get an accurate cut. We're going to start our square in a square by putting a top and a bottom of the fabric number 1 on top of the fabric number 5. I want to sort of center this, so I'm just going to finger press so that I can make sure that I get pieces semi-centered. We're going to square this block, but we want to make sure we've got the fabric the way we need it. And I am actually going to pin this. That way I can just take it over to the machine and go ahead and sew, because I can also do this other side. And so I would pin and then I could chain piece everything at the same time. Once I get these sewn, they look like this. I like to then take off these little dog ears, cat ears, bunny ears, whatever you want to call them, just so that when I go under the foot, I don't run into any resistance, especially if I'm using a walking foot. So I go ahead and trim this off, and then I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to fold this in half, just like this, and I am going to take and center these just like I did before. And again, I'm going to pin those in place, just so that I can go to the sewing machine and chain piece all of them at the same time. So I'll go ahead and put my other one on the other side. You're going to end up with a square that looks like this. These squares need to be trimmed down to 2 1/4 inches. The easiest way to do that is to bring out the quarters mini Stripology ruler, because I have quarter slits versus 1/2 inch slits. The 2 1/4 inch square I am looking for is right here, this white one right here. I make this a little bit easier on myself by having arrows that will line up at the corners of the square I'm trying to trim to. That way I can more easily find which one I am looking for. The other thing I do is that you'll notice down here at the bottom that your squares, that the cut lines for the squares for the 2 1/4, we have one that is a teardrop that is above, and we have one that is a teardrop below. And so I go ahead and mark which teardrop I'm going to be wanting to place my blade in, and that makes it quicker and easier for me to find where I need to go. So what I'm going to do is place my block right here. Notice that the block 5 fabric is in the center and it is on point. And so I am going to square up by using the horizontal line and the vertical line going through my square on point. The nice thing is that I can see right here that I have a 1/4 inch from the slit there and a 1/4 inch from the slit there, so I know I'm doing what I want to do. And then I can come down here and put my blade into the correct slits, and I am already starting off with a really nice square. So next I'm going to just turn it. Now I have my horizontal lines as well as the vertical line and the horizontal line here, and you can see just how easy it is to square up a 2 1/4 inch block using the quarters mini ruler. Okay, not everyone has the quarters mini ruler. So we're gonna bring out the squared mini. There's a couple things I want you to notice with this squared mini because we don't have the slits on the 1/4 inch. We're gonna have to be careful about where we want to line up. So I'm gonna take this square right here. And remember, we want to have 1/4 inch on each side. And so the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and on my Stripology squared ruler, I am lining up right here with the edge of the diagonal line, and then I'm also making sure that I am 1/4 inch. So that's this dotted line right here away from the edge of my square. And so that helps me to get a nice square. So I've got that nice line here. I'm going to turn my ruler over now. And I am going to line up this nice edge with my 1/4 inch line here. And then I've got my 2 1/4 inch line right here that I can then cut on. I'm going to do the same thing I just did now on the other side. I am going to watch though for my horizontal lines as well, because this is an actual, if I line this up here, I have an extra 1/4 inch, and so I can line up here with a line right there, and I am double checking right there that I have that 1/4 inch there. Remember, this gives me an extra 1/4 inch up here so I can be nice and straight here, and I can cut on my 2 1/4 inch. And this gives me another 2 1/4 inch block. All right, let's say you don't have a squared mini, a 1/4 squared mini, and what you have. So if you don't have either of those rulers, then we're going to bring out our squared ruler. Now, with the squared ruler, the way I do this is I line up my diagonal line here with my square that's in the center, and notice how I'm off here, and I can see from this very first slit that I have my 1/4 inch there, but I am not going to cut here. This is not going to be my straight edge. I'm actually going to cut on the 2 over here. So one of the other things we want to make sure is that we're sort of straight horizontally and vertically through our square. It's not going to be perfectly on simply because we're not using one of the other rulers, but it does, we will get the same result. Okay, so now I'm going to cut on my 2 because 2 plus 1/4 is 2 1/4. And then I am going to move my block. So I'm going to turn my block. I'm going to line up with this nice straight edge on my 1/4 line right here. And then I'm going to do my 2 1/4 over here. I'm going to turn it this way so that I am 90 degrees, and I'm going to do the same exact thing, lining up horizontally, and then I'm going to cut on the 2, and I'm going to turn it, line it up one last time, and line it and cut on the 2 one more time. Not as perfect as the other 2, but definitely workable. From my fabric too, I have pulled out some scrap. I'm going to fold this scrap in half. I need 8 2 1/2 inch squares. So if I'm using my mini, that means I sort of have to do my math where I've got my 2 1/2 and my 5. If you're using the squared, you would just use your square marks. Then I can take these, making sure I'm on a horizontal line with my mat, and that way I can line everything up nice and easily when I get my ruler in place. And just like our fabric 1, I'm going to take these squares and cut them diagonally. We're doing square and a square again, so we're simply going to place one of these on top and one of these on bottom to get started. We have a nice halfway point right here, so when I'm doing these, I will simply fold in half and then line them right up with that point. And again, I like to pin these, and I'll do both sides and take them to the sewing machine. Once I have this done, I end up with a piece that looks like this. I'm going to do the same exact thing that I did earlier, and taking off my little ears before I add the next two pieces to right here. And I'll do the same thing where I just pin in place. And again, these are going to be trimmed down, so if you're a little off, it's okay. But if you're a lot off, not okay. So when I went to iron this, I recognized right away that I was way off this point. And so obviously something had happened when I was stitching. And so when I turned it over, I noticed that my fabric got way off and I was way off of my point here. And so it is worth it to me to go ahead and rip this one little stitch. And so it's not hard for me to do this. I'm just going to come in here. And if I place my seam ripper just like that, then I can get this out really quickly, and then I'm going to iron it before I go through and stitch that again. These squares need to be trimmed down to 3 1/4 inches, and so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to demonstrate how I do my 3 1/4 inch. That is this white line out here, and the 3 1/4 inch is going to be this slit and this slit right here. And so again, the nice thing about these square and a squares is that I have numerous points with which I can make sure that I am centered. I have a vertical line here, I have a horizontal line here, I have diagonal lines going through my inner square, and so I have numerous places that I can make sure that I'm getting a nice square for my 3 1/4 inch square. Next, I'm going to demonstrate how I do this same method with my Stripology squared mini ruler. So I'm going to bring this out, and just like before, I'm going to start by making sure that I have a nice straight line to start with. And so I am lining up horizontally and vertically here. I can see my diagonal lines here, so I can make sure that those are straight. And then I can come in and give myself a straight line 1/4 of an inch away from my 0 line. Now I can turn my ruler over. I can use this straight edge, and I can use the horizontal lines and the vertical lines here to make sure everything is straight. And then I'm going to go over here to my 3 1/4. Now I'm going to turn it sideways, starting over on this side where I have my nice 1/4 inch line. And I'm going to give myself a nice, notice how I'm horizontally lined up here as well. So that gives me a nice square block. And then I'm going to turn my ruler over so that I can line up with that 1/4 inch line. And go to my 3 1/4. And And then it's a little bit more difficult when you're using the Stripology squared, but possible. So let's bring in the Stripology squared and just talk about where we need to cut. So we're going to need to cut on a 3 1/4. Therefore, we need to cut on that 3-inch line. And so I'm going to bring it right in here. And I'm sort of lining up my horizontal lines in here with my square. Now I can take and line up with my line there. And I'm doing pretty good because I've got my diagonal line there and it looks really good. And now I have a horizontal line with which I can line up as well. So I can come in here, and again, I'm looking at these diagonal lines and how nice and straight they are. Want to make sure that I have plenty of 1/4 inch over here. So again, it's not as perfect as the others, but it's looking great. Finally, we're going to need 3 1/2 inch squares out of our fabric number 3. And so I have folded over, and so this is my fold. That gives me 4 widths of fabric. And I'm using my Stripology Mini to do this, but you could certainly do the squared and it would be a 3 1/2 and a 7-inch cut. I'm going to start with my 3 1/2. And then I'm simply going to move everybody out of the way and come in here with another 3 1/2 inch cut. Then I'm going to turn these. I will not be able to fit in for both of these, so I'm going to have to do one at a time. If you had the squared, by all means, turn these guys sideways and do them all at the same time. I actually could just about get this out of here. So depending on the cut of your fabric, you might actually be able to get all of yours out of the one cut as well. I'm going to take these guys and we're going to chop them in half diagonally. And I'm using the same method I did before, using my squared mini. We're going to do these just as we did before. So I'm going to pin and pin. Once I get done with that, I want to make sure I'm going to be cutting off my pieces before I finish putting those on. And then one more thing before you continue is I want you to notice how far away these are from the edge, and so they're not an exact 1/4 inch, and that is okay. I wanted it that way so that you guys wouldn't get stressed out over having too little of a 1/4 inch to stitch with. So then I'm going to come in here, so you can see on here all 4 of these are pretty big, and so I'm going to come in here. I'm going to do the same thing I did before, folding over so that I have my piece, and then once we get done with this step, I will show you how to square it. I feel like I have been waiting for this yellow my entire life. I love bright colors, and I believe this is going to really bring some color to the quilt. I want to demonstrate how to square these using both the Stripology Mini and the Stripology Squared. So I'm going to start with the Stripology Mini. When I am using the Stripology Mini to square, I'm looking for this outer 4 1/2 inch right there, and you can see how I have a lot that I can trim off here with this block. And so I am looking for 2 different things. I'm looking for my horizontal and my vertical, and then I'm looking at my diagonal lines here. And so I can see how I'm going through these squares here. I can see how I'm going through these squares here. And I want to try and line that up as best as possible. There's a lot of lines to go through here, so if I'm off on one, it's not going to make that much of a difference. And then I'm going to be cutting on the 5 1/2 and the 1. And I'm simply going to turn it once. And I'm going to line right back up. Now I have horizontal lines on top and bottom, so I'm also lining those up. Makes it a little bit easier to get everybody in line. And then I'm lining up my horizontal and my vertical as best as I can. A lot of stitching here, so something will be off, and that's okay. And that gives me my sweet little block with that yellow. Oh my gosh, that's going to pop right out. I love it. So the Stripology squared is going to be the same exact thing. My 4.5 right here is in the center. I just have to change which ones I'm going to be placing my rotary cutter in. And so again, I have all these wonderful lines. Because I'm using the center squares, I'm going to be using the white lines. And then for this one, I will be cutting on the 4, and I will be cutting on the 8.5. Turning once, lining up my horizontal and vertical. I find that lining up my horizontals here get me into place pretty quickly, and then I'm looking for my horizontals and verticals here, and then I'll be looking to see how my diamonds are, or how my diagonals are fitting in. And that gives me a nice 4.5-inch square in order to finish off Penelope's playground, the piecing part. And that's it for Block D. I would love to see how your quilts are coming along and what your blocks look like. Next week is our final week for Penelope's Playground. We are going to be adding all those blocks together and putting on the gorgeous Penelope silhouettes. I cannot wait to get started. Don't forget that you need to like, subscribe, and follow for the full series. You'll find the pattern and all the other stuff down in the description below. See you next time for some absolutely fur-tastic quilting. Bye, everyone.